Hey everybody, Duke Neil here again, moving into, I guess, part two of the conversation. So in my earlier video, you heard me talk about my concepts around how I believe that the SCA is a combat sport and how we bring certain fighting skills to that and how bringing a fighting skill to SCA as a combat sport can lead to greater success. So that was, I guess, a very conceptual conversation. And today I just wanted to talk about some of the practical elements that come from my fighting style that I bring to that. What I want to talk to you about today is footwork, more specifically fighting footwork. I've made some notes just to make sure I don't ramble too much in these, but hopefully it's helpful. So footwork is something that I always stress, as my squires will tell you, because it's something that needs to be trained in, and it's often ignored by far too many SCA trainers, and that's because they either don't understand its importance or how to do it correctly, or they don't understand that they are themselves doing it correctly because they haven't analysed it and broken it down as part of their fighting style. So in any fight that I've actually been in outside the SCA, I've utilised skills that have been trained into me, drills that have been trained into me, and for most part they're Krav Maga skills. But it's funny how those skills translate into other things that we do in mundane life. And what I often say to people in the SCA is, if you can improve your footwork and you can make your footwork fighting footwork, it's going to take 5% effort from you in addition to the training that you're already doing, but it's going to make a 30%, 40% increase in your skills as a fighter. So when people commence in SCA fighting, the focus is always on throwing shots, the snap, the offside, a wrap, whatever. And you get a little bit of attention on stance, but the stance attention that you get is often to do with where your shield is positioned, where your sword is positioned, and the actual stance that you're taking up with your feet is just a little bit of a token thing about where to point your toes or something of that nature. You go on as you learn, and as you're learning, you're standing in front of a pel, and for the most part early on you're moving statically, just statically throwing shots. Occasionally you take a step, throw a shot. Now, you can learn in the SCA to throw the world's most perfect and quickest sword cut, but if you're not in the right position, you'll hit a shield and not a person. If you're not in the right position, you'll throw your shot and then you'll get hit. So as you develop and later in your SCA career, someone will say to you, oh, you need to step offline when you throw that shot, or oh, you need to step through that person as you're going, oh, you need to step as you throw. So you take that advice and you go to the pel and you try and step past and you take a step, or you walk, something that you've done all your life. So what if I told you that you don't step correctly? What if I told you you don't walk correctly? Because when you were a toddler, you didn't learn how to walk tactically because you didn't need to. So you're thinking about moving and you're just moving like you are in a street. That's not the way to move in a fight. The way I often demonstrate this to people is when I get them to take a stance or move in their fight in a training session, that they just walk. And so what I do is I say, okay, now we're in a bar and I'm about to attack you, and I want you to square up. And so I square up and they square up, and straight away the feet go down, the knees bend, there's some tension in it. Okay, so you're ready to fight now. Well, why aren't you doing that in your SCA combat sport, you're not taking a position to be ready to engage with a target. So, I mean, from a more practical stance, because what I'm about to talk about is stance, you need to prepare yourself. You need to think that you're about to engage in a fight and how you're going to move in that fight. And it's to do with your feet, your knees, your hip, and your chest. Getting them in that preparatory position. So it's hard for me to I guess, demonstrate today because it's raining here in Canberra. But let me see if I can talk you through it. So I always have my feet straight, pointing at my attacker. That allows me to address a threat that's in front of me. The weight of my upper body is always over my hips. My hip weight I try and have suspended by my knees, which are slightly bent. And then I have all that weight transferred to the balls of my feet. I sometimes say get up on your toes. So you can either translate toes or balls of your feet just behind your toes. Same thing depending on how you think about your body and how you move your body. But what I want is not your heels on the ground. I want you in a dynamic position, ready to move forward. Whilst I say it's dynamic and you're ready to move forward, it's actually neutral because you can push back, you can push to the sides, you can do whatever you want from that position. It prepares you to move dynamically. Your weight is distributed evenly. You're literally a coiled spring and you're ready to move in any direction. Now, at any point in time, whether you move in SCA fighting or you're having a fight in a bar or whatever you're doing, you need to be able to deliver an effective shot. So if you've moved from position A to position B and you haven't moved tactically, you're now a sitting target because you're out of position and you can't throw a shot, which probably means you can't deliver an effective defensive block either. So a great way to test whether you're in an appropriate stance is to move between position A and position B and stop, and then work out if from that position you could throw a punch or a kick or draw a weapon system or whatever your relevant analogy is to a fight that is not SCA. Could you do that from that position? If you've moved and your feet are now crossed, and you've stepped in a weird position where you can't deliver a kick, and if you threw a punch, you'd probably fall over. So you haven't moved from point A to point B being ready to fight at any point in time because you have walked or moved in a non-tactical way. So moving offline, you need to think about how you're using your feet. So I've talked there about stance and I've talked about having your weight evenly distributed. So when you're walking, how are you walking? If you go, and I often will refer you back to MMA or I'll refer to boxing in this as well, nobody walks. It's not crossed feet. If it is crossed feet, it's to get across the ring till you're in an approximate range where you're going to start engaging, and then it's small movements on the toes, static step. It's not crossed. Step, 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 step. Always weight forward, always ready, because they're ready to take a punch, throw a punch, or take a kick, or dodge, or weave, or move, and that requires balance, and that requires you to be forward leaning on your feet and ready to go. Now, some fighters can do that on their heels. Some will kick back and do it from a defensive position. Now, that's fine. You can maintain balance from there and you can kick and you can punch, and it's a completely valid way to do footwork. My argument is that being on your toes actually makes you faster. It makes you more dynamic and it pushes you into the fight. So it makes you be able to control the range and press the range a fraction of a second faster than if you're on your heels. So that's my argument with that. But moving on your heels, perfectly valid if it's purposeful and tactical when you're going between your two positions. So I guess to wrap that up in a much shorter video, moving dynamically prepares you for the fight. Go and watch some UFC fighters, some boxers. Watch their footwork. Just watch what they're doing with their stance and their foot position as they move into a fight. Look at their weight distribution on their feet. And then moreover, when you see bad weight distribution from what they do, see if that has an effect. Quite often it does. Quite often you'll see that the turning point in a UFC fight is when someone is caught off position because they've decided to do something creative and they've done it in a way that's made themselves a sitting target. As I said earlier, just doing this takes 5% more effort. I did a thing back when I was a squire, which was as soon as my helmet went off, I would get on my toes and I would spend the entire training time with the helmet on my toes until I learnt how to do it and keep my heels off the ground. So it's 5% more effort for infinite amounts of reward. So if you're training this and your opponents aren't training this, then clearly you're going to have an advantage, a tactical advantage. So I'll finish up there and just remember, if you find yourself in a fair fight, then your tactics suck. See you, everyone.